Hello and welcome to another episode of The InEVitable. I'm Ed Lowe, head of editorial at MotorTrend. This is Johnny Lieberman, senior features editor at MotorTrend and automotive influencer extraordinaire. And this is our podcast on the future of mobility. Johnny likes to say future of the car. This is where we talk about EVs, electrified vehicles, plug-in hybrids, also autonomous vehicles, if and when they are going to show up, what that future might hold. Great show for you today. It's a little bit asynchronous, I would say, because we shot this thing back a few months ago.
Yeah, we shot it a few months ago. The intro, for a variety of reasons, we're reshooting the intro, but we're going to have a incredibly, probably the guest I've been the most intimidated by, but also most excited to talk to, Mr. Ed Begley Jr., which is, first of all, for two schmucks like us to be talking to a guy like him is really cool, but also, here's a guy, he's been literally driving an electric vehicle since 1970.
Yes. So if you don't know who Ed Begley Jr. is, and I'm sure there's a few of you out there, especially the younger generation, this is a longtime Hollywood actor and arguably the first of the genre of celebrity environmental activists.
Yeah.
So as Johnny mentioned, he's been a fan of Mother Earth since before most of the people listening, I would hope, were born.
Yeah, Earth Day 1969.
Yeah, he was at the 69 or 70, very first Earth Day.
69, I think.
And then, we'll clarify, and then subsequently was so moved.
We do clarify, we're talking about the past. But
right. Subsequently to that, started driving whatever EVs were out there, which at the time were mostly
golf carts.
Like golf carts.
Yeah.
Golf carts with like a license plate and a headlamp.
Yeah, but we'll get to all that. But before we get to Mr. Begley Jr., since we taped that, not that he necessarily inspired me, but maybe it was the last push I needed, I've decided to purchase an EV. Mm-hmm. I somehow conned my wife into, I showed her, we were skiing, and we've been wanting to get an SUV because we really are taking the kids skiing a lot, and for various reasons we want our own. And saw a Rivian. So I Rivian in the parking lot, and I was, this was back in December.
Well, she saw it. You knew a Rivian.
Well, I saw it and started taking pictures of it. And first of all, she thinks I'm insane because we'll be having like very serious conversations in the car about our life and the future and our child, and I'll be like, "Ooh, look, an Avanti!" Like she thinks I have problems. But
an Avanti, come on.
Well, whatever it is, But you know what I'm saying. And so there's this beautiful blue Rivian sitting there, and it's got like real plates, not dealer plates on it. I'm taking pictures, and she goes, "What's that?" And I go, that's that thing. Remember, I was gone for 10 days.
That's MotorTrend's 2022 Truck of the Year.
That's MotorTrend's 2022 Truck of the Year. Remember, I drove from Georgia to was it Oklahoma in one of those. No, I don't remember that. But she goes, and I'm like, well, it's electric, and she wants a pickup truck for some reason because she wants to throw our kid's bicycle in the bed and not worry about getting the insides dirty. And I said, all right, we it's not going to be super cheap, but we can do it. And then,
so you don't have it yet. You have it on order.
Yeah, it's actually here. It's in
nice.
El Segundo, but they lowballed me on my trade-in, so I had to privately sell the car. Anyhow, that's another story. But in March, our air conditioning at home broke, and we had people come out to give us turn your hair white estimates on what it costs to fix AC in the supply chain impacted world we now live in. Mm-hmm. And they also said, by the way, your box sucks. You need a whole new electrical thing. And I said, hey, when you're putting in this very expensive box, can you add 2 EV charging lines? And that'll just future-proof our house. And so we're ready to go. We're ready to make the jump to EV ownership. It's going to happen in a couple weeks. And I'm kind of thrilled about it, honestly.
That's awesome.
Because the Rivian, you've driven it. I mean, it's just... what a product!
Yes.
What a great product.
Yes, and I'm mildly surprised that is where you ended up, given the just this sort of cascade of EVs that are coming out right now, and that your Instagram feed is mostly luxury performance cars, and this is no slouch. 835 horsepower,
908 pound-feet
of torque, 4-motor.
Yeah.
The first production electric vehicle with 4 motors, one at each wheel, and it drifts, it slides.
But it also off-roads better than anything
15
else.
inches of ground clearance.
I loved it off-road. That's what really sold. And look, I snuck it past. My wife is letting me buy an 835 horsepower car.
Yeah. That's actually my chief struggle with the vehicle is that I don't need 800. I don't really need 600. Like I'm pretty happy with like 400.
Yeah, you say that now. I remember back in 2005 or 6 when the Audi RS4 came out and it had 420 horsepower. I wrote some cockamamie opinion piece about how this is the perfect amount of horsepower. You never need more than this.
You really don't.
Well, you first of all, the Rivian in efficiency mode with two of the motors deactivated makes 410 front wheel drive 410. So it's like Bill Gates talking about how nobody needs more than 640K of memory. Like you always need more horsepower. You're always going to need it. But I'm just stoked, and and it's because in some small way people like Ed Begley Jr. Kind of kept this fire burning. LED low emission fire.
Well, no, but it is good. It's a great segue to the conversation we had with Ed, primarily because, and this is all stuff that we're trying to do at MotorTrend, which is figure out electrified vehicles and how to incorporate them into your life. And it's not just the sort of confusion, the FUD I call it, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around what's the right car to buy, how long is the range, what's the recharge time, how do I charge it when I go on a road trip. It's this other stuff that you just dealt with, which is I gotta upgrade the electrical in my house. Oh, how much is that going to cost? What do I need? And like, so my first question to you is like, why'd you put in two lines? Because is this you're future proofing not just for your personal car, but the deluge of press vehicles you're going to
part of that. You'd have to see my house, but we have two separate driveways, and so I can see a scenario where my wife's charging the Rivian. I have a press car that needs to be charged. We want to charge them both. And then also what's great is, we put solar panels in a few years ago. So during the day, we'll be able to like just, directly charge, and then my wife's my thing is when I see like a gas tank on a quarter, I drive immediately and fill it up. It makes me sick, the idea of not having gas. My wife, it'll turn red, and she's like, I'm going to go pick the kid up. I'm like, what? You have no gas? How can you live like this?
You ever rescued your wife with an empty tank?
I have. I've rescued my wife when she lost her car keys.
Okay.
I feel like once. I feel once maybe. But I make sure my wife's in a car. And if I ever get in her car, I fill it up immediately.
Yeah, I do that too.
And so anyway, I'm looking forward to all that stuff, but I also heard through the grapevine that you have sort of gone the electrified vehicle route. Because you're, by the way, the host of the InEVitable drives around in an old Porsche Turbo and a diesel Land Cruiser.
Yes, but we've been talking a long time, and I think we've actually talked about it before that it is inevitable for the Lowe family. We're just trying to figure out what the right step is. We got a new kid. He's 19 months old at this point, and like I have unique car tastes, as you know, and I've been pushing my wife really hard to get a minivan, which she was open to for a while. We had a Honda Odyssey long term.
Did your wife talk you out of a minivan?
Funny story is, she's great in that.
Because if she did, I'm gonna.
Well, she didn't talk me out of it. She just made the move herself. She went totally baller style on this. In that, and this is this thing I tell our staff we have to think about, which is like, we love cars and we want nothing more than just sitting around and shop and like daydream about which is the best one. A lot of other people want to move a lot faster. And she's just like, there's so much information out there. It's exhausting. I just want to get a new car now. The precipitating factor was that we had this old Audi A3, and you could accidentally lock the keys in the car. You would shut it and it would automatically lock.
That's bad with a little kid.
Yes, and it happened once.
Smashing windows.
Oh, and she's just like lost it. Like, we're getting rid of this thing, and I was like, ooh, okay. But we kicked around a bunch of vehicles, and I've been like, ooh, we should get your favorite minivan, the Toyota Sienna, because it gets
Ed's joking. That's not my favorite minivan.
36 miles per gallon. It's a hybrid, but I want to know this plug-in situation, so I'm like, it's got to be a PHEV, and we had the Jeep Wrangler PHEV for a while, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah.
We could use a little more range, but
a little more, yeah.
Cool.
We were kicking around all sorts of vehicles, and I was like, "Oh, we should get a Pacifica. That gets like 30 miles of range, which is perfect, and it's a minivan." She was like open to it, but then she also kind of went back and forth. She's like, "Well,
I can't see your wife driving around in a minivan.
She's like, treat yourself." Yeah, right. So we ended up with a German plug-in hybrid.
Oh, are you keeping it a
secret? We bought it used.
Are you keeping this a
secret? I might a little bit, just for now.
Okay.
Nice. Limited range, but it's got CarPlay. It's got everything we wanted. We wanted CarPlay. We wanted a backup camera, all the mod cons, modern conveniences.
Oh, you guys think about stuff like that. That's
Well, she did. She was like, she loves. And now she's like addicted to CarPlay, which is great.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't get her to look at. I bring all these cars, and she's in an old car. I could never get her to look at the backup, the screen.
Yeah.
To back up, she's always looking in the mirrors. I'm like, the camera's gonna tell you how close you are.
Right.
I don't trust it. I don't trust it. And so, this is a thing that I notice with other people who don't get in and out of new cars all the time. It's like, all of us were like, hey, new car, floor it. Slam on the brakes.
Right.
Like, let's just test everything out to the extreme.
I always try, when I have people drive, like, press cars, I always say, like, you get it past 4,000. It's okay. You're not going to hurt it,
Anyways, so we're living with this car. It's fascinating.
Now, it's a plug-in hybrid, so is it level 1, or are you just plugging into the wall?
I'm literally plugging into the wall.
So how long?
It takes 14 hours to give us about 15 miles.
So, it's funny, though, because my neighbor, who I helped buy, he got a Kia Niro hybrid, I want to say, plug-in hybrid. And I'm like, yeah, you got to get an EV charger. And then he had the same thing. He's like, electrician said we got to get a new panel. Right. And he has a 3-mile commute, round trip. Right. He's a high school principal. They just run an extension cord out of the garage. And he's like, you know what? It's fine.
That's literally what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think we're going to upgrade, though, at least to 220 so we can get the charge time down to like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're still kind of COVID. Like we're in the office a couple days a week. She drives it mostly, and it's just local errands. So the mileage is fine. She loves it. Feels like a tank. But I was
tank.
Yeah,
it's a Mercedes.
Nah, I was gonna say, and this might be we'll talk about this during another episode. But the thing that weighs heavily on my mind is an article you keep referencing about plug-in hybrids and actually how inefficient they are once that range runs out. Yeah. And that's a topic that our buddy Dan Neal wrote about.
Yeah. We should have him in here to talk about it. But we should also get to the superstar guest.
Yes. Yeah.
Ed Begley Jr.
Yeah. So we'll table that.
The first Earth, we're getting a sign. The first Earth Day was 1970. I think he says 69. Anyhow.
No. First Earth Day is 1970. And we are going to talk to a guy who was there, Mr. Ed Begley Jr. It's great to have you. We had to reschedule this, but we really, really wanted to talk to you. I should introduce myself first. I'm Ed Lowe. I'm the head of editorial for MotorTrend. MotorTrend, the automotive media brand, a longtime magazine, but we've moved digital. We're doing all sorts of fun stuff in the car space. My colleague, Johnny Lieberman, known him for many, many years. He's our senior features editor. Automotive expert, raconteur.
I'm also on Spike Ferenston's podcast, and he says hello, by the way.
Whose podcast?
Spike Fereston.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Tell him hello.
I will.
So, look, really happy to have you. We are doing The InEVitable. I think you can see it behind us. This is our foray into the future of mobility. It covers electrified vehicles, the future of automotive, where this is all going, connected cars, self-driving cars, all this stuff. But we really, really wanted to talk to you because that first step is about this move away from internal combustion, from sort of the reliance on petroleum, moving into electrified vehicles, so hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and then into full battery electric vehicles. We're in that moment right now. We feel like the mass adoption of electric vehicles is just right around the corner. There's a lot more automotive manufacturers building electrified vehicles. But we felt like, we really need to talk to somebody who's been in this space for a long time, has been a pioneer in terms of recognizing the need to make this transition. And your name came up. You've been one of the leaders in sort of telling the story, talking about moving towards electrified vehicles, embracing the environment in sort of the bigger picture in all sorts of ways, including, from housing, how you live, what you do, consumption, but also, of course, mobility and transportation. So that's kind of the long setup and the reason why we're so happy to have you here.
Also, I just want to say, when I was 10 years old, you were in my absolute favorite movie back then, Transylvania 65000, which Ed always puts together a dossier of like our guests and everything they've done. And I noticed I was notably absent, and probably looking back, it was because of Gina Davis's outfit. But I just want to say I've been a big fan forever. Spinal Tap, The Simpsons, Curb Your Enthusiasm, everything you've done. So we're really, really, really happy to have you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Ed, for having me on. And I was a fan of that costume too, by the way. On the set and on screen and everything. Gina's a dear friend and a beautiful lady. And still stay in touch with her. And what
wonderful
fun we had making that movie. And I'm so happy to talk about this because I've been, as you probably know, driving electric since 1970. They're very primitive back then, of course. But I wanted to do something because I lived in L.A. and I experienced that horrible smog for 2 decades at that point. I bought my first electric in 1970. It was a Taylor Dunn. It was more an electric cart than an electric car. But I didn't really understand. I just wanted something to, help me because I was mostly riding my bike and taking the bus to get groceries or to go to a laundromat. It was just easier in the electric car. To take somebody on a date, too, was a little easier than taking them on the bus, So electric car served its purpose. And it had a California license plate, But it was basically a golf cart with a windshield wiper and a horn, but it was licensed for the California roads, not the freeways, of course, but California roads. And I rode it for a while. It cost me $900. I bought it from a guy named Dutch in Reseda, and I was the first person under 65 that had ever bought one from him.
That's amazing. And so I've done some research. I read this story. So I'd like to dig in a little bit. So that was 1970, and that was really is that right after you attended the first Earth Day? Did that sort of crystallize everything for you? I got to make I'm making a personal choice right now because of this inspiration. So that's great. So can you tell us a little bit about that first Earth Day and how inspiring it was and kind of where were you before that? Were you kind of in this thinking about the environment and Mother Earth and all that? Or was it that really the catalyst for the mindset change for you?
It was a catalyst for action, but I've been thinking about it a while. And the reason for that was there's plenty of bad influences. I said the smog and then the Santa Barbara oil spill in 1969, that led up to the Earth Day in 1970, Cuyahoga River near Cleveland catching fire. All those negatives influenced me, but the positives had perhaps even more power. The positive was I was a Boy Scout, so I got to see nature up close and personal. I thought that it was worth preserving because of scouting. The other and the most powerful positive was my father. Now, we had different political ideology, but he was a great man. He was a wonderful father and a wonderful man. And he was a son of Irish immigrants. He had lived through the Great Depression. So we simply turned off the lights, turned off the water, saved string and saved tinfoil. But the best thing he did for me over the years, when I would complain about the smog or anything, he'd say, Eddie, I hear you. I understand what you're against. You're against smog. I'm against it too. But what are you for?
Right.
It's an interesting list of the things you're against, but what are you for? What are you doing about it? What can you do to make it cleaner? You don't want smog? Well, maybe ride your bike more, take the bus more. There's going to be less pollution coming from a car, So I did that my whole life. I rode my bike and took my bus a lot. But 1970, sadly, my dad died within a few days of the first earthquake. It was an earthquake. That's an interesting slip because it happened next year in 71 in the valley where I live. But it was an earthquake for me in my life and many people's lives. The change in that first Earth Day to understand what we needed to do because of the oil spills and the pollution.
Okay.
So that first Earth Day got me motivated, a lot of it because of my dad. And I started recycling after Earth Day. That was something new. I'd been riding my bike and taking the bus, as I said, but I started recycling. I started composting. I became a vegetarian. I did all this other stuff. Then after a few months, I want to get an electric car, but it was 1970. They're very hard to come by. So I thought, where would I possibly even find an electric car? Who would I call? How would I do this? Well, look in the phone book. My father's voice said. I talked to him and myself kind of at the same time at that moment. I went, I'm not going to look in the phone. There's nobody selling electric cars in 1970.
Right.
Shut up. Look in the phone. And I looked, shut up, old man. So I just appeased my father. You see, I did the footwork. I looked in the phone book and what the hell? There's a guy named Dutch in Reseda selling electric cars. It's right there under electric cars, electric vehicles, some in the yellow pages, some little tiny ad about an inch tall, electric cars. And I went, it was $950. As I said earlier, he mostly sold them in the desert communities or to elderly people.
Right.
People just want to go to the market and say, not go to the gas station.
Sure.
So I wanted it to do something for the environment. And right away, I just felt better about things from all that I was doing. And the most important thing I'll say, I saved the best for last, even though I felt good, it also was good for my pocketbook. It was cheap. Right. It was cheaper in 1970, same way it is today, to go 20 miles or whatever, 30 miles in an electric car by plugging it in. It's cheaper today the same way. By plugging in a car, it's cheaper than gasoline. And it's much cheaper with maintenance. There's no tune-up, oil change, fan belt, radiator flush, smog check, valve job, all those things. So I liked that I was saving money, and I knew my dad would like that too because he was a cheapskate.
Right. That's awesome. So I'm going to pause here just for a second and address a couple of things. First of all, we're hopefully getting a younger audience with this new medium of podcasting and video podcasting. So we need to explain that the Yellow Pages was this.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, it was a book that they used to give the telephone company give you for free on your doorstep, and it was like really thick, and it was basically like the internet in print form, but it's alphabetically arranged, so you could go to electric car, and you might find this guy Dutch in Reseda, which Johnny, you should tell people where Reseda is.
It's in the Valley.
It's a suburb of Los Angeles. Back in 1970, there probably weren't a lot of people out there, just maybe like orange trees or something, right? I don't know. What was in Reseda back in the 70s?
There was still a lot of agriculture when I was very young, and there was some left when I was 20, the first birthday. There was some left then, but when I was quite young, there was a lima bean patch across from our house
exactly.
in Van Nuys near Kester and Sherman Way there. But yeah, I dialed up Dutch and something like
phone.
This.
It had a cord though.
Phone. It was a landline, but it wasn't like this. It had a dial on it. You actually dialed. You turned the dial, and electrons.
I'm old enough. I'm old enough to remember
to the phone company.
Right.
I'm old enough to remember not only the dial phone, but Ed and I, we both grew up on the outskirts of L.A. And I remember when we had to go into L.A. to see like a Dodger game in the 70s. The smog was shocking.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of people forget how bad L.A.'s smog was.
Your lungs would hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, I could, especially because I grew up in Thousand Oaks, kind of beyond the end of the valley, and Ed's from Camarillo. Right. But my dad was a huge baseball fan, and so we'd always go see Dodger games. And I remember, he got depressed about how kind of disgusting the air was, and it really left a mark on me. Where anytime. We're in the car biz, so anytime it's like, they're making us put mufflers on the car. I'm like, great, make it cleaner because you don't know how bad it was. It was sickening,
Right.
It was so bad, and I lived in the San Fernando Valley, kind of near Sepulveda and Sherman Way, kind of in the center of the valley. So people would come from out of town, relatives, what have you, friends would visit from out of town. They go, San Fernando Valley? Why do they call it a valley? I go, well, there's actually the Simi Hills over. Oh, no, you can't see them. There's the Verdugo Hills over. Oh, you can't see those. Santa Monica Mountains. Oh, you can't see those. 4 directions. You couldn't see that there was hills to prove why it was called a valley.
Right.
And it was not just visual impairment. As you said, it hurt your lungs. They had many days at school that went, you can't go out in the yard today. You can't play. Yeah. You got to stay inside. Not that the air was that much better inside. It was marginally better. But it was smoggy, horrible, choking air. And then finally, all that stuff we hoped would work did work. We talk about bad news with the environment, but I want to urge people to occasionally remember some of the victories, some of the good news. We have 4 times the cars in LA from 1970, millions more people, but a fraction of the smog.
That's right.
We've done much. All the stuff we hoped would work did work. Catalytic converters on cars, cleaning up the power plants, public transportation getting cleaner instead of diesel. All that stuff that we hope would work did work, and we can do that, I think, now on a global scale.
So this leads me to my big question for you is, what is it like being Cassandra? In other words, like you saw the future very clearly in 1970, and we got the Clean Air Act passed in 74, 75, but like adoption of EVs, really, you were a punchline on The Simpsons for like, I drive a golf cart, powered by my own sense of self-satisfaction.
Very good.
Thank you. But it turns, I'm a big Simpsons fan, but it turns out like you were right. Like all the money now, I shouldn't say all, but like the bulk of the money being spent by the automotive industry globally is now on battery-powered cars. I think BMW said they're no longer spending a nickel on internal combustion. GM has announced that. General Motors has announced that. Everyone is pretty much about to announce that. And so for you, Cassandra was, cursed to have visions of the future, but nobody would believe her, I think was the thing. What's that been like for you? And this is for decades now. Like what's that experience to have been Cassandra, but now everything you said is actually coming to fruition?
Well, as regards the bad news with climate change and all of that, there's no pleasure at all in being right about that stuff. We talked about it for a long time, and I wish I hadn't been right. I'm pulling for a lot of the AM radio people that said it's all a hoax and what have you. I'm going, I don't think that's the case, but I hope you're right.
Yeah.
They were not, as it turns out. But, we can't relive the past, but we can do something starting today. And there's so much that we can do nowadays. And I'm so encouraged by, as you say, what is happening, the plus, what you can do today. You can get an F-150 truck, that's an electric truck, that you can also power your power tools with and run, circuits in your house if your power goes out. There's so many practical things. It's not just for people like me that, are early adopters, but the average Joe and Jane now can get an electric car. And it makes a lot of sense. Again, as I said, because of the features you get with it, like in an F-150. There's so many reasons to do it now rather than just being a good citizen. And the best thing I like about electric cars, the number one best thing I like about it is I happen to know for a fact that you cannot make gasoline on the roof of your house. But I also know that you can make electrons on the roof of your house because I've been doing it since 1970.
Right.
I've also earned a wind turbine as part of a wind farm in the California desert since 1985. I've had solar hot water in my house since 85. PV, photovoltaic electric panels on my roof since 1990. So I know it works. I've been using it for a while. And now we need to go further with it and make some big changes.
Okay. This is great. This is
He's making me feel bad because I only have solar panels. I don't own a wind farm or
well, you got to get on it.
I know.
What can you do for the world?
I got solar panels.
So let me. I love where this is going. It's exactly what we wanted to talk about. But let me do a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, Ed, do you mind adjusting your camera just a little bit down, just a hair, because we're cutting your chin out. Perfect. Okay, number one. Number two. Can I just comment that you have the most awesome little nugget in the background? That Oscar, am I correct? Is that your dad's? That is my
father's Oscar.
That is fantastic.
I put it on display to share my pride in his accomplishment.
Best Supporting Actor, 1962, Sweet Bird of Youth.
Correct.
Ed Begley Sr. So that's awesome. Very cool.
He willed it to me, and I'm very proud that he did that he chose me to carry on his legacy, and I've been working in the business because of his inspiration since 1967. He passed in 1970. And my only regret is that we never worked together as two actors in a play or a TV show or movie. But
and he was in.
I remember him still. He was great.
He was in 12 Angry Men, which is, I think, one of the best
we watched
films.
Every kid watches it, at least I think so.
Yeah, I still watch it. I think it's one of the best films ever made. One of the most important films ever made back when.
Yes. He was juror number 10, and he was great in that part and great in everything. He was in Patterns, a wonderful TV show, and then a movie, a drama written by Rod Serling called Patterns. Wonderful, wonderful. He won an Oscar behind me there for Sweet Bird of Youth, in 1962, and a great actor, a great father, and an environmentalist without using the word environmentalist. He cared about the web of life that supports us all. He was son of Irish immigrants, so he really knew about saving and conserving.
Yep. So if we go back to that, and I want to move on quickly after this, but I'm super curious. In this time frame in 1970, you buy this Taylor-Dunn golf cart, and to be clear, everybody knows if you've gone to any golf course, you've seen these things. This is like what the groundskeepers or what the golfers actually would sit in and ride around in. The topic of range anxiety, we're hopefully talking to an audience that is either considering an EV or maybe has one, and we know it's not a lot of people yet. We're kind of approaching the large part of the bell curve in terms of people buying into these things, and range anxiety still is kind of a factor. You, again, with your long history of this, you've dealt with this forever. I mean, how far could you have gone? How far could you have gone on that first golf cart? On the first Taylor-Dunn, and then how were you charging it back in the day? Was it literally just like clamping the battery posts and charging it off of your house current, or what were you doing?
It had a built-in charger, 110-volt charger that led to the DC of the 4 batteries, whatever's in it, 4 12-volt, I think. Right. Back then, batteries, deep cycle kind of batteries, high amp hours. And so I would just plug it in at my apartment building, and I told the manager, I said, I'll pay, whatever the difference in the electric bill. I'm going to plug in where the washing machines are. There's a little tiny laundry room with a washer and dryer. I said, keep track of your bill. Whatever it goes up, I'll pay the difference. Each month he went, I don't think it's going up anything I can't notice. It's the same. It didn't make any difference to the department manager. I checked back. Do I owe you anything? No, it's not a lot of power, whatever you're doing. And so I plugged it in there, and I went around. It had a range of about 20 miles, I believe. Okay. The top speed was 25, I think. I don't even think it was 30, but I drove it around, and I took Cindy Williams, who played Shirley on Laverne and Shirley. We'd worked on a show called Room 222. It was long before she did Laverne and Shirley, any big work. I took her out on a date. I did not get a second date. It was not exactly a Dave Magnet.
That's
I hadn't fully charged it when I went to get her. We were going very slow by the time we pulled up to the restaurant. I think a kid on big wheels passed us by, so it was very slow back then. But I stayed with it because I knew they were going to get better with them. And then finally, by 1990, I started driving them regularly a bit. In the interim, I just got super efficient cars like a Datsun B210 Plus with a fifth gear, and I just tried to get small, efficient cars for years. I drove a Carmen Ghia and did that. But then I got into electrics again in 1990, and I, got a guy had converted a Subaru, a 73 Subaru. He converted it to electric. He sold it to me for $1,700, not $17,000, $1,700. It was a used Subaru, so I got it. But the batteries were in great condition. They seemed like new, and they had good tires. So I was ahead of the game just on the tires and the batteries, the value. And so then with my friend Howard Latofsky, a very bright guy that also drives electrics, he helped me rewire it, get a Curtis PMC controller, and change the battery configuration so it was a higher voltage car, the Subaru that I got in 1990, and it became now a vehicle that could go on the freeway. It could go 65 miles an hour.
Wow.
What can I ask? What happened to that car? That sounds like a really
how do we find that car?
Yeah, how do we find that car? That sounds like an interesting time capsule.
What did I do with that car? Hold on a second.
So I'm trying to. 73 Subaru is like an R2 or something. I mean, it's a.
Yeah, I sold it to somebody, and I can't remember. It got in an accident. That's part of it too. Somebody rear-ended me on Pacific Coast Highway, but I sold it to somebody, and they repaired it and kept it electric. And I then moved up to a VW Rabbit that had much better range and good pickup. My friend Richard Mayer built it for me. Again, the only electrics I was driving back then were ones that hobbyists and people like that would convert. They'd get a VW Rabbit. Like I bought that for $10,000 from Richard Mayer. He found a VW Rabbit in the junk shop, the junkyard, I should say, that had like a leak in the gas tank. Good, we don't need it. The engine was shot, don't need it. The alternator, good, don't need that. All the stuff that it didn't need was broken.
Right.
The steering wheel worked and the chassis was fine. So for $10,000, he made a little bit of profit on it and sold me this car. I drove it for years and sold it to somebody who drove it for years. And that car, that was pretty zippy too. It could go on the freeway and what have you. Then after that, I got into, I also had a Bradley in there for a while, which was a kit car.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You would put that, there was a fiberglass body that they put on a VW
Volkswagen
chassis and wiring harness.
Yep.
And then you could either have an internal combustion version of the Bradley or what I had, which was an electric. And I drove that for a while. It had the gull wing doors and everything.
Yeah, those are super cool.
And these are all fundamentally lead acid batteries, 12 volt, like just basically car batteries, all connected in series and then charged, as you said, on either like a house current, 110, 220, something like that. Okay.
But VW Rabbit I drove for a while. I only put one set of batteries in it in the 4 years that I had it. I changed the batteries out once. It cost me like $800, but I had no tune-up, oil change, any of that stuff. So all in all, the maintenance on it was very low. I bought it for $10,000. I sold it for $10,000 because it was in great condition when I sold it.
Free car.
Because I had moved up to a GM EV1 by then. Now the manufacturers were starting to make electric cars.
So that's
one of those.
That's what I'd love to talk to you about more is the EV1 because
absolutely
a lot has been written, said, done, movies made. Who killed the electric car?
Before we get into that, let's just pause. Let's just pause here and just acknowledge how awesome and committed Ed is, right? Like from the very beginning, single dude living in an apartment finds a way to live with the earliest of electric vehicles. Like right now, the big conversation about EV adoption is like, what are all the people in apartments going to do with charging? Like the multi-unit dwelling question for people in urban cities like New York. Like how are they going to own a Tesla or whatever? It's like where there's a will, there's a way. Mr. Ed Begley Jr. Was dating actresses, taking them out to dinner in his fancy electric
failing
car.
on the date.
Failing on the date.
But
you know, he persisted.
Not because of him, because of the car.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that you have, again, true to the pioneering spirit, have really went above and beyond. Most people have pulled, pun intended, pulled the plug on adopting electrics far sooner, but you persisted through the 90s, through the 80s and 90s, all the way up to EV1. So back to you, Johnny.
Well, yeah, no, I was, they made a movie about the EV1, 2 movies,
right.
who killed the electric car.
Right, Chris Payne.
I've talked, and I've talked to a number of fellow journalists that have drove it like on the launch, but I never talked to anybody who lived with one. So could you tell us about the EV1 as an owner and what, and then after that, the experience of having to give it back and know that it got like bulldozed into a landfill somewhere.
Yeah. It was really the big transformation in me driving electric vehicles. It was the turning point because before that I'd been in primitive golf carts, and before that I'd been in conversions. And now to have a car that was manufactured, as an electric car like that, a beautiful piece of equipment like the EV1. It was only a 2-seater, so that was the only restriction in it at all. That some people couldn't get it, couldn't live with it, but it was a great car, and I loved it. I had it for the first 3-year lease. I would only lease it, could not buy it.
Right.
So I leased it for 3 years with they were lead acid batteries, and then they came out with a nickel metal hydride battery.
Right.
And so I got it with a nickel metal hydride battery that had an increased range. Instead of like as much as 90 miles or something, maybe 76 miles you could get on it. You could get 120 or 125. And I got that. I drove out to Palm Springs once and made that a real world number. I made it out to Cabazon where they had chargers there, electric vehicle chargers.
That's where the dinosaurs are.
Mall.
Yeah.
That's where the big dinosaurs are, is Cabazon, right?
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. So I plugged in out there and then went on my bicycle. I had to get into Palm Springs. So I just kind of made it work. I was stubborn as always, guys. What it was, guys. I would I knew all the shopping malls and places in Santa Monica and West LA that had, just 110 volt outlets in the parking garage. I would go there and plug in. I'd leave a little note saying, I'm happy to pay for this electricity. I'm not a kilowatt bandit. I would go into the security office of what is it called there? The Beverly Center, and talk to them. I said, hi, occasionally I drive this electric car. My name's Ed Begley. And occasionally I'd like to plug in here while I see a movie and patronize this wonderful Beverly Center and buy merchandise from these vendors at the mall. But I intend to pay for it. I would like to give you, $5 now that should last me, 6 months or a year, because I showed them the price of what a kilowatt hour was, how long it was charging. A lot of them scratched their heads, but most of them agreed to it. Occasionally you'd have some guard, a security guy that didn't know that I was allowed to plug in. They come and unplug you. You can't steal power from, even though it was maybe if you had plugged in all day, 75 cents or something.
Sure.
At the most. People didn't understand that. But I was stubborn and I would do it to get around. I'd just plug in where I could, and I had friends that would let me plug in. And I made it work for years until the EV1 came along. Right. And then I still was kind of stubborn because, as I said, I'm trying to get to Palm Springs. No way the car could make it there, but it could make it to Cabazon. You plug in there and take a bike the rest of the way. I was a stubborn bastard.
Wow.
And what was it like to drive the EV1? Like, I always hear there's this wonderful thing. Because again, they've all, except for 1 or 2 museum pieces, they've all been destroyed.
Yeah, we were in high school when they came out.
We were in high school. And again, I think I saw 2 in my life on the road, just going to LA. But so what was it like?
It was a 2-seater. It had incredible acceleration for any electric car I'd ever owned. For any car I had owned a Mustang when I was quite young. And it was something perhaps akin to that or greater than that, the acceleration, because it's instant torque electric, as you guys know, and there's no slight pause when shifting gears is just, one gear, it's
right.
Straight ahead. And so I really was blown away by it because of the speed and the handling. It handled very well. It had good climate control and everything. But you had to be very careful because it was a big difference between, trying to be, hypermiling, if you will, to try to get the most range to make it out to Cabazon even. You had to really stay in the slow lane and go 58 to 60 miles an hour,
right.
And try not to get rear-ended, watch your rearview mirror, go in the slow lane behind a truck and maybe draft and not get too close. You don't want to piss off a truck driver by being right on his ass. Be a respectful distance. It was a balancing act. But right. I was stubborn and I wanted to make it work because I just didn't want to, I didn't want to support back then the $250 billion a year we spent on foreign oil.
Right.
I didn't want to be part of that. I wanted to clean up the air in Houston, Bakersfield, and LA.
Right.
And all that stuff was a road to doing that, I knew. So I stayed with it. I was stubborn.
Okay.
So then what were your when the EV1 program ended and the cars were taken back and you could no longer lease them, like what was your feeling then?
Yeah, what was that end game like?
I was kind of accepting of it because I knew the fix was in from early on. Because a lot of people, everybody knew about the electric car. There was a great ad campaign with the voice of Linda Hunt, this wonderful actress. The electric car is here. Toasters kind of, shuffled out to the street in a blender joint of, this wonderful, animation, CGI stuff where all these right. appliances went out. The electric car is here, but nowhere in the ad, maybe some of the newspaper ads, a little icon as big as my pinky nail or maybe my thumbnail that said Saturn dealer. Nobody knew. Everybody, I would do a poll of groups of people when I would speak, say, how many people know there's an electric car called the EV1? Nearly every hand went up. How many people know where to get it?
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody knew where to buy it.
Right.
And then often, and this happened multiple times, I had letters and faxes and people speaking to me personally that this happened. They went into a Saturn dealer. They figured that out somehow. They went into a Saturn dealer and wanted to get an EV1. And they were told, you don't really want one of those. Let me show you another car. Those are cars that are a pain in the ass. The people in the Saturn dealership
sure.
try to and often successfully talk them out of buying one.
Yeah.
Right.
But by the way, that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon. It I know which currently Chevy dealers, if you go to buy a Bolt, they want to put you in like a 3-row SUV because why not? So yeah, that's still happening. But go ahead.
Yeah, I had it happen. A friend of mine was wanting to buy an electric car and. They're saying, now, look, I know you get the carpool lane stickers with this, but they're not going to last forever. And also, let me show you another car. He was trying to talk him out of it right in front of me to get a Honda that had a good plug-in hybrid. And he wasn't being talked into it. They tried to talk him out of it. This is just a few scant years ago.
Yep,
so
still happening.
Continues.
Yep.
So you knew the fix was in. You gave back your EV1.
And I jumped right into a Toyota RAV4 because I knew those were available. You could get those.
Okay.
And I got rid of the lease was ending, let's say, in July or something. I turned mine in early in the year, like March or April, because I knew they would be gone quick. They'd, be snatched up quickly, those RAV4s. So I got in one of those. And I had a child at this point, or was soon to, by this time, it was like 2001 or 2. I can't remember what it was. But then, was it 2001 or 2? Do you guys remember?
Right around 2001.
I don't remember off the top of my head, no.
Yeah. I got out of that because I knew they were going to take it. I got out of that car, turned it in, and got a RAV4 because I had a child by then that was 2 years old, and I couldn't put her in a 2-seater with the car seat.
Right.
You can't put them in the front seat. So now I went, great. I could put my beautiful daughter in the back of the car, safely in a car seat. I've got a 4-seater. We could take another couple out to dinner, me and my wife, and it's going to be great. And I drove that for a dozen years or more. 2014, actually, now that I think about it, 2014, I went from the RAV4 into a Nissan Leaf, and I love that car too, and I drove that for years. But I like both cars. The RAV4 was a great pure electric, not a plug-in hybrid, pure electric RAV4, then the pure electric Nissan Leaf were both manufacturer-built, wonderful cars. I really like them.
Can I ask you about the RAV4? Like how from the time you bought it, and you said you have it for 12 years. Like how did it hold up?
It held up pretty good, but there was that thing that everybody talked about and talks about it. Oh, the batteries, you're going to go broke I did have to put one set of batteries in those 12 years. They lasted for a while, but then the range started to get so diminished after, I guess it was 9 years. Mm-hmm. I think somewhere around the 9-year mark, I had a change of batteries, and it was a big price tag. I think it was, I can't remember, it was more than 5,000. It might have been 10,000.
Right. Which is,
a lot of money.
Honestly, if you go to a dealer with a current car and you need a new engine, it's about 8,000 or 9,000. So it's
right.
It's comparable.
And that's the thing. I had that car for 12 years, and I had no tune-up, oil change, fan belt, radiator flush, smog check, valve job. So I got in a free ride for a while. If you amortize that 12 grand over those years, it wasn't too bad. And the most important thing besides the cost, I want to say, is they did not throw those batteries in a landfill as everybody thinks they're going to do.
No, they were
remanufactured.
Right.
They sent them up to Sacramento. They put my RAV4 in a car carrier, sent up to Sacramento, put somebody else's old batteries that had been remanufactured into my car, and took the old batteries out and remanufactured them for the next guy.
Right. Interesting.
And so they did that for years. And then when they got old after that, they used them as part of a solar program somewhere in Montana. They just kept. And again, like the batteries today are made out of lithium. It's not they're made out of, strychnine. Right. People ingest lithium every day. They take it as for
it's
different neurological conditions or something. Right. And there's no, that I'm aware of, toxic waste dump of that. There are toxic waste dumps of lead acid batteries. I know that.
No, in fact,
that hadn't been the case.
In fact, there's a new market emerging in terms of sort of recycling batteries at scale. J.B. Straubel, who was the CTO at Tesla, he just launched a new company called Redwood Materials that's all about trying to capture all of these commercial batteries for vehicles, industrial use, even like power tools, and like try to like figure out a way to, because this mass adoption of EVs is coming. We need more and more batteries, not fewer. And the rare earth metals in them are hard to source. But let me ask one thing. I'm super curious. This is an interview of a very virtuous man, Ed Begley Jr. Did you ever leverage your celebrity status to get into any of these vehicles? Does Ed Begley just walk into the Saturn dealership or go to Toyota as the guy off the street, or did you have an agent call on your behalf? Were you doing this? Like, how were you getting some of these vehicles? Because I imagine that being on the EV1 list early on, or getting into that RAV4, that was it took some doing.
Right, because they made like 500 of those RAV4s or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Did you throw your weight? Did you throw your weight around? You can tell us.
I didn't need to throw my weight around because they all sought me out. Nearly all of them sought me out. They certainly gave me deference to me, whatever you want to call it, because of my status as an actor was minor compared to my status as a spokesperson about clean energy and what have you. I was kind of known a good deal for that.
The Simpsons,
more than a celebrity actor, as a celebrity environmentalist, I guess, that got me. Not everybody thought I got like a free car and what have you. I never got any discount in any car or anything financially, but I did get, early on the list. And also I got it kind of fair and square in many cases, because when they first had the hybrid, the Toyota Prius hybrid, they had it only in Japan. And when they said that they had it in Japan, they had one of them here in Burbank at, what's it called? I think of the name of the place, this, lab, this kind of, research center. Okay. And so they had one of them there, and I had my checkbook in my hand and said, I want to get one in America. I want to be one of the first. Put me on the list. I legitimately, now that I think of it, I actually legitimately had my place in line, because I put up my tent and I slept the night beforehand, in different places practically. I really I had heard about these technologies coming, the EV1 coming. So I got my place in line because I told them I wanted one whenever they were going to come out of it. Right. Come out with it. And that's how I got the EV1 early, and that's how I got the Prius early, because you can't drive to New York in the EV1, or even the RAV4, the Nissan Leaf. It'd be very difficult to do, given the charging and the range of those cars. Now I do it all the time in a Tesla. Tesla, it's easy to drive cross country. Back then it was not. So for years I had to have, for long range trips, I had first a natural gas car for years until I learned some of the problems of fracking. And then I wanted to be clean at the tailpipe, and I thought it was cleaner at the manufacturer. I was wrong about one of those things. But at any rate, I drove hybrids for years,
right?
And that I needed for long range stuff. So, but I was, now that I just think about it, I legitimately had a place in line because I was first in line asking about it.
Right. So you went from RAV4, you got a Prius in there, a Leaf, and now I understand you drive Tesla Model S.
Oh boy.
How many have you owned? Are you still on your first one? And what's that been like? And what do you drive?
This is my first Tesla I've ever owned. I bought it 2 years ago.
Okay.
Because to be honest, I'm not a movie star. I'm a working actor, and I make a fine wage. I'm not remotely complaining, but it was a little rich to my blood for a while. Okay. The Tesla price tag. So I got the Nissan Leaf, which was like 37 grand or something after the incentives. So that's something, that I could afford. I put it on, payments or what have you. And I bought outright the Nissan Leaf, and I did that. But, getting into the Prius was life-changing. And now my wife, I got her one too. I leased one for her. She has the Model 3. I have the S. I just drove to Texas and back, to Pecos, Texas and back. I just drove to Knoxville, Tennessee and back from Los Angeles. Right. And I have to, whenever I go anywhere, I just do it in the Tesla now because I like a drive, and it's so easy with that, adaptive, that self-driving. Right. It's just amazing, and it's very relaxing. Your neck doesn't get tight. Your arms don't get tight, your legs, because it's doing most of the work. I keep my hands on the wheel.
Right. No, it's good on the freeway. Yeah, it's good on the freeway. I want to ask you, and you brought this up when you were talking about how the battery, lithium's not strychnine. How do you deal with, we'll call it FUD? Like, there's so much fear, uncertainty, doubt by people that are like, no, like, they totally ignore the fact of like what it takes to get gasoline out of the ground, and they're like, I read one article where it said lithium mined in China is terrible, therefore all EVs are terrible. I just get so angry because it's like you've literally read one article and now you're against this whole thing. How do you deal with it? Because you seem like a much calmer, more reasonable person than I am. When someone says that to you, like, cobalt, it's horrible, therefore EVs can never happen. Like, and you've dealt with this since 1970. Like, how do you deal with that?
The way I deal with it is, first of all, acknowledge that there is pollution involved with the manufacture of an electric car and electric car batteries. I acknowledge that. There's pollution involved in making a bicycle. Making a bicycle, there's pollution. Making a shovel, making anything. The question is how much. Is it, get responsible people, like let's say the Union of Concerned Scientists, somebody that has a lot of Nobel laureates on their, letterhead and what have you, not just their letterhead, in their membership. More than half the living Nobel laureates are part of something called the Union of Concerned Scientists. They study things carefully. Okay, let's look at this. How much pollution is involved in making a Prius or an electric car, and how much is used in making and running and fueling, both? How much pollution? Actually, it's better to buy a bicycle than it is to go in a Hummer. Okay, let's start there. It's better to, and go down the list. Which is better? Is it better to be on public transportation, even though it's fueled by fossil fuel? Yes, that's better than riding X, Y, or Z. Is it better to, make and manufacture and use an electric car than it is to make and manufacture a normal car with all the pollution from the extraction, the refinery? You want to look at everything with the batteries? Look at it. But they had some bogus science. I remember some crazy stuff years ago. Dear friends of mine called me up and said, I just read a thing online where the Hummer is less polluting than the Prius.
That's the single most damaging article in the last 10 years. I remember that. It was nonsense. But everyone still brings it up. Everyone still brings it up. Right. It's fueled.
And it's just when the Union of Concerned Scientists got into it, because they did, really, that said, let us follow through. What data did you use? They used like 1885 mining, statistics about nickel.
Right.
They took all the nickel that Sudbury, Ontario used to have decades ago, a polluting plant in Sudbury, Ontario in Canada.
Sure.
But that was all, they took the pollution for making everything. Stainless steel for making stainless steel knives and forks and kitchenware, stainless steel for everything. And they took all that pollution and assigned it to the manufacturer of come on, give me a break.
Right.
It was just crazy.
Right. But it did
that article years ago.
Oh, there's that article.
What's that?
It served its I don't want to say evil, but evil purpose.
Right.
I mean, I've had more people whenever I sing the praises of an EV bring up that article about how a Prius is worse for the environment than a Hummer. It spread like wildfire, and it to me, I just find it very discouraging.
I mean, we live in the information age and the misinformation.
No, I know, but
disinformation age.
Yeah,
right?
but
it's sad. It's sad. But the kind of power you have in doing that.
Right.
They hired a lot of these oil companies, for instance, hired Burst and Marsteller, the same people that worked on the tobacco campaigns and things like that, hired that same PR firm to help them pitch the idea that the Hummer was cleaner and what have you. And
it's people are more apt to believe a big
climate change isn't happening.
Right. That people are more apt to believe the big lie than the little lie. Right?
Do you have any interest in driving the new electric Hummer?
I'll look at it, if it's electric, I'll certainly look at it. I'm sure there's merit. People that need that kind of vehicle. For me, I need a light and smaller vehicle for what I do. The S that I drive is a 5-seater. It's actually one of the bigger cars I've ever owned. It's very roomy and large inside and out for me. But I don't think I need something like a Hummer. But who knows what the future holds for me? I'll certainly.
I just see a great photo op.
Most important.
I just see a great photo op with Ed Begley Jr. like endorsing a Hummer, which I think is great.
But let me give them thanks. I'm glad that they're making it electric.
Right.
Let me be grateful here that they're doing that. That's a good thing, and I will thank them for it.
Well, let me, and that's a great way to sort of round this conversation out, because you said very early on that you were excited about the coming of the Ford F-150 Lightning. Like, it's great that there's finally like an electric pickup truck, and that is the Ford F-Series trucks are the number 1 selling vehicle in America. America loves pickup trucks. They've been 45 plus years, I believe, F-Series. So big move by Ford. This is part of that mass adoption sort of wave that we're coming. Like it or not, it's inevitable. People are getting into electric vehicles, right? So what else excites you about this moment that we're in? Like, again, you've been on this long journey. You mentioned vehicles like the F-150. Are there any other vehicles out there that are kind of on your radar? But I do understand that we're talking to you very specifically about cars because that's what we're all about. But you have much broader interests, again, like housing and, I know you mentioned everything, gardening, you grow your own food, composting, solar energy, all that stuff. Kind of summarize it for us. Like, you've been following this for so long. We had a loose title for this episode. This is sort of like the comeuppance episode in terms of like we're talking to one of the pioneers.
Yeah, 52 years of doing this.
Yeah, what's your perspective now that we're in this moment, and what can you share with our audience? And we have a lot of auto industry people that listen to this. Hopefully, like, what do you want to tell them in terms of what they're doing and where we should all be going? It's a big question.
I'm excited about what's available in automotive technology because it's getting so much cheaper to build these kinds of cars than it used to be. I'm very, very excited about what's happening in wind and solar. It's already happened. The price of that has gone down so low. Many people and companies and what have you and power groups can afford to buy wind and solar. It's cheaper than coal, no matter what. So all that is very exciting to me. But I urge people again, and it goes back to my dad, goes back before I was born. Pick the low-hanging fruit first. Do the stuff that you can afford. We're not going to solve this climate change problem with just replacing our light bulbs, but start there. Change out your light bulbs. Do everything that you can afford. It's an interesting list, the things you cannot do. Give me the better list. What I want to hear is the things that you can do. Can you buy some light bulbs? Can you take public transportation if it exists near you? Can you ride a bike if weather and fitness permits? Can you compost? Can you grow some vegetables in your front or backyard? Don't have a front or backyard? Get part of a community garden. A community garden doesn't exist in your neighborhood. Start one. The no's are interesting. What do you say yes to? Do something that you can afford. You're not going to run up to the top of Mount Everest. You get to base camp and you get acclimated and you climb as high as you can. And not everybody can afford that. They can afford solar panels and what have you, that stuff at the top of the, an S model Tesla. But, climb as high as you can and do what you can. I think everybody can do something. Let's start doing that today.
That's awesome.
Wow. Thank you so much. This has been
awesome.
This has been what I've hoped it would be. So that's really good.
Yeah. I'd love to talk to you.
Real honor, by the way, to talk to you.
Yeah.
Likewise, you guys are so knowledgeable. I'm so enjoying this myself. Thank you.
Well, no, listen, it's been a pleasure. Ed Begley Jr., longtime environmental pioneer. I would say star of big and small screen, but I think you like to refer to yourself as a working actor, which is great.
We should point out that this is a reschedule because he was scheduled to come on and you got a gig. And you had to work,
right? Which is fantastic. But we'd love to chat with you again.
Thank you for that change, by the way. Thank you.
Of course.
We'd love to chat with you more about this. I feel like there's so much to talk about.
I want to get him in a Hummer, EV Hummer.
Yeah,
I think that's a story right there.
I think we have access to a lot of these new EVs. So if you're interested in anything under the sun, just because you're curious about where the world is at, we'd be happy to assist you with that. We're all in LA, But thank you so much.
Really appreciate it
for
the conversation.
Let's do this again, guys. You've been great.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you,
cool.
Ed.
All right. Thank you, Ed.
Bye.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Ed.
Bye-bye.